I think the possibility practically for the two-state solution at the moment is not possible. And yet, we can't continue to allow the situation where the rights of the Palestinian people are disrespected. So we're stuck with a conundrum. You will have seen as in the most recent decisions, for instance, of the International Court of Justice, where the International Court of Justice have said that these settlements, for instance, on the West Bank, are illegal. The occupation of what was Palestinian land post-1948 is illegal, according to the International Court of Justice. But Israelis are completely ignoring whatever the ICJ says. So I'm saying we're stuck with a situation where the rights of the Palestinians are not being addressed, and the possibility to address them in the context of a two-state solution, I think, ceases to exist because of the behavior of the Israelis. So what is going to happen? Gaddafi, for many years, Gaddafi said he was against this two-state solution because he thought it'd never work. Let's have a one-state solution. The war in Ukraine was in fact a U.S. war against Russia, using the Ukrainians. The purpose was to defeat the Russians so that it's like they want to defeat the Chinese, to make sure there's no power in the world, as Wolfowitz said, who would challenge the interests of the U.S. I'm saying that is why you find the discussion about multipolarity. The Russians would never, ever agree that Ukraine should become a member of NATO.
Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Let's continue now.
As you can see, these questions were asked by postdoctoral students. That's why they are very difficult. I don't know where we start. The Soviet Union, I'm starting with the last. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union lost at least 20 million people, 25 million people during that war, maybe 30 million. As you can see, this was an enormous sacrifice in the struggle to defeat Nazism. Of all of the countries that were involved in that war, the Soviet Union is the one that lost the greatest number of people. Therefore, there is a great sensitivity. The Soviet Union is no more, but talk now about the Russian Federation. A very great sensitivity about issues of war and peace. Because I'm saying of the sacrifices that the country made during the Second World War. Winston Churchill raised this thing. It was strange that it was him. But as they were building the EU, what became the EU, Churchill raised this matter and said, you Europeans who are working on what, as I say, became European Union, be mindful of the fact that the security of the Soviet Union is very important because of the losses they suffered during the war. Now, I'm mentioning that because when at some point, as the Soviet Union was about to collapse, issue of the normalization of the relations between when Gorbachev was still at the head of government state in the Soviet Union, in its discussions with the West, with Reagan and others, question of relaxation of tensions between these two camps and so on arose. And in the end, one of the decisions that was taken was that there would be a unification of Germany, the two Germanys. And the commitment that was then made by the Western countries that the West Germany would remain part of, well, Germany would remain part of NATO, but NATO troops would not go anywhere east. So that even if those East Germany becomes part of Germany, you would not have NATO troops there. It relates to the matter about the sensitivity about the security question of the then Soviet Union. But in the end, that agreement between the East and West about the NATO borders not going anywhere further east, that matter changed. So that in the end, the question then arose. Even 2008, there was some NATO conference where a resolution was taken to say that even a country like Ukraine and Georgia, which shared borders with the Russian Federation, were perfectly at liberty to join NATO. Putin raised, there was you would remember the Munich Security Conference takes place in Munich on security. Putin raised this matter in 2007 to say that the security of the Russian Federation was very important, and countries of the East and West must handle this matter, bearing in mind that there are security concerns of that kind. To cut a long story short, when the conflict that you referred to, you talk about 2022, it's around this question, where the Russian Federation are saying they would never ever agree that you would have NATO troops in Ukraine on their border. Because I'm saying of this preoccupation with this matter of security. The Russians, the Russian Federation offered all sorts of solutions to NATO, to the US, about how this matter could be handled. But there was an insistence on the NATO side that the Ukraine had every right to apply for membership of NATO. So you then end up with a situation where NATO troops would sit on the border of the Russian Federation. That's what caused the war. But that war had started not in 2022. It started in 2014, when the then the democratically elected president of Ukraine was removed virtually by coup d'etat. you would remember the way the Western countries welcomed that change. That then a conflict broke out with the eastern provinces, what is the Donbass now, of Ukraine, refusing to accept that coup d'etat, that change of government. So the war started then. You would have seen the statements made by Angela Merkel and François Hollande 2 years back, where they said that, you remember there was negotiations at Minsk to resolve the conflict that was taking place in eastern Ukraine. And the Minsk agreement was agreed. Both Angela Merkel and Hollande said that actually that was, they did that in order to buy space for the government of Ukraine to arm itself. They're not genuine about that agreement. So in 2014, the NATO countries then pay attention to this matter of building up the military capacity of Ukraine. So in the eyes of the Russians, the reason you are building up the capacity, military capacity of Ukraine is to make sure that indeed you can then impose this thing about the membership of NATO with a strong military Ukraine that can defend itself. So in the end, the Russian Federation felt that if the only way to stop that process, which would lead to Ukraine becoming a member of NATO and the placement of NATO troops on the border of Russia, was indeed to start the military operation in 2022. Yeah. That is why around this whole discussion of this matter, this issue about multipolarity has arisen very sharply. Because it is about this issue. There's a matter that's not discussed very often here with regard to this issue. It is what is called in the U.S. the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Paul Wolfowitz, a Republican, at some point he made a proposal. It was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the U.S. should never allow that any country in the world should be so influential that it threatens any interests of the U.S. And the paper leaked that proposal, and it was attacked even by the New York Times. This is too imperialist and all that. But that concept has never left U.S. national security policy. So that is why you would find a lot of people in the United States will say the war in Ukraine was in fact a U.S. war against Russia, using the Ukrainians. The purpose was to defeat the Russians, so that it's like they want to defeat the Chinese, to make sure there's no power in the world, as Wolfowitz said, who would challenge the interests of the U.S. I'm saying that is why you find the discussion about multipolarity. Now, our country takes a position that it is non-aligned. It's correct. It's a correct position. It's not aligned with Ukraine. It's not aligned with Russia on this matter. And they are saying that to be a peaceful resolution of this issue. And that resolution cannot avoid discussing this matter about a multipolar world. Because it lies at the heart of the conflict in Ukraine. The Russians would never, ever agree that Ukraine should become a member of NATO. I am saying, bear in mind, these are people who lost 25, 30 million people during the Second World War. And I don't imagine NATO will want to change its position to say anybody who wants to apply for join to membership of NATO, they are free to do so. So in the end, I'm saying this conflict, my view, is that this war in Ukraine can only be resolved, ended, in the context of a discussion about this multipolar issue. The positions taken by the South African government about non-alignment between the two belligerents is fine. It's correct. But in the end, the solution has got to be between the true belligerents. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. We support, I'm talking now about the ANC, we supported the proposal about a two-state solution with regard to Israel and the Palestine question. This was in support of a position that had been taken by the PLO as a representative of the people of Palestine. You would remember that there was a conference in Oslo some years back, which was between the Israelis and the Palestinians to discuss what to do about the conflict between the two of them. It's out of that conference that there was a decision, okay, let us then have a two-state solution. And as part of that process of forming a two-state solution, the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. I'm saying we supported that proposal about the two-state solution because that was the proposal of the Palestinians themselves. We said we agree. We support your position on this. You remember we had, there was a proposal here for a two-state solution also here, which we refused. You remember they wanted, some of the Afrikaners wanted a folk state. So there must be formed a folk state somewhere in South Africa. So we have that state and then you have South Africa. We said no. But I'm saying in this case, when the Palestinians themselves said the two-state solution, we said we'll support you. Practically what has happened with regard to that is that, this thing that they talk about, facts on the ground. Effectively what has happened is that the possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. Because of the way the Israelis have handled this matter. If, for instance, you take the occupation, the settlements on the West Bank, practically the physical possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. And recently you saw what the Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, that in any case he is opposed to a two-state solution because you can't establish, he says, by definition, if you had a Palestinian state, sovereign and all that next door, it would be hostile to Israel. So he said quite plainly they are against a two-state solution. And as part of the reason, the approach towards this conflict in Gaza of the Israelis has been to, if we can chase away these Palestinians to go and live somewhere else, it'd be better. So that Gaza then becomes part of Israel. I think the possibility practically for the two-state solution at the moment is not possible. And yet, we can't continue to allow the situation where the rights of the Palestinian people are disrespected. So we're stuck with a conundrum. You will have seen as in the most recent decisions, for instance, of the International Court of Justice, where the International Court of Justice have said that these settlements, for instance, on the West Bank, are illegal. The occupation of what was Palestinian land post-1948 is illegal, according to the International Court of Justice. But Israelis are completely ignoring whatever the ICJ says. So I'm saying we're stuck with a situation where the rights of the Palestinians are not being addressed, and the possibility to address them in the context of a two-state solution, I think, ceases to exist because of the behavior of the Israelis. So what is going to happen? I think we're in a situation of a conflict which won't end. And I think any attempt to persuade the Palestinians not to fight for their rights will fail. So the Palestinians will continue to fight for their rights. And I imagine Israelis will continue to talk about self-defense. So what is to be done? I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think we should ask the Palestinian colleagues need to answer that question. One of the unfortunate things that has happened, it seems to me, you've had a virtual disappearance of the PLO. So, who speaks for the Palestinian people? That becomes a question. The People's Republic of China has just done a very, very good thing of convening all of the Palestinian factions in Beijing and saying to them, you must come together as a people and pursue. So there's an agreement among themselves, the Palestinians, reached in Beijing, that they will then come together and maybe reconstitute the PLO or whatever decision they take. Because at the moment, we don't have this one voice of the Palestinians to pose this question that you're posing to me, to say to them, what is your future? What do you say about yourselves? Gaddafi, for many years, Gaddafi said he was against this two-state solution because he thought it'd never work. Let's have a one-state solution so that the Palestinians and the Israelis, everybody, the Jewish community and the Palestinians, they get together and live in one country as we live in one country. That proposal, of course, would be unacceptable to people like Netanyahu. We've seen the attempt to define Israel as a Jewish state. You've got Palestinians who are Israelis. But they want to attach this particular description to Israel, if they can, as Netanyahu is saying, if we can chase away all of these Arabs in Gaza and then West Bank and take over these territories. That will be his solution. So I'm saying, colleagues, I think hopefully the Palestinian leadership will tell us what it is that needs to be done in this situation. Because the answer to that question is not very easy. The situation definitely on the ground is against the notion of a two-state solution. Yeah. We all repeat the call for two-state solution, but in practice, I think the possibility to bring it about is not there. And as I've said, Netanyahu has said, in any case, over his dead body, there would be no two-state solution. Yeah. And as far as I know, we are not about to withdraw from the ICC. The position I think that we've taken, which was that we should act on the matter of the ICC together with the rest of the African Union. And what the African Union was about was not withdrawing from the ICC, but changing various parts of the Rome Statute. And I think that is the South African position.
Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.